And you know why? Because you guys have the same right to respect for your physical and and human dignity as I do and the other adults in this room. Yeah? I think we need to remember that. Yeah? I don't think, we cannot imagine, defining acceptable levels of violence against women like myself or, older people. So why then children? When you start thinking about it, it's pretty crazy. And Save the Children believes that ending the legality of any punitive violence against children is an essential strategy for ending all forms of corporal punishment and all forms of violence against children. The idea that, breaching a child's human dignity and physical integrity is acceptable, or even as some, still suggest, in their best interest, or, the defense of reasonable chastisement. It perpetuates the status of you guys as objects or possessions. And it makes every sort of extreme abuse and exploitation, such as, for example, child sexual abuse and trafficking, more likely and easier. Let us not complicate things. I think it's important to remember what Peter has kept telling me for the past 10 years. He happens to be my global guru, and a lot of my colleagues as well, so I'm happy about that placard. Hitting people is wrong, and children are people too. This year, it happens to be 32 years since my country, Sweden, so I quite like that you kissed my flag earlier on. Introduced the ban on corporal punishment. And by doing so, of course, Sweden was the first country in the world to prohibit violence as a means of child rearing. Many countries have since followed. And, well, we should have seen 29 countries, but we don't. Anyway, you've got a postcard in your conference bag, so go and look at that one before you go to sleep. The abolition of corporal punishment in Sweden, along with the debate that preceded it and the public campaign that followed. I'm not sure if you recall, some of you that saw the film earlier on, the gentleman called Olivier from France explained that, when we did the campaign in Sweden in the 70s, and I happen to have been born then, we did it on the milk cartoon, so all Swedes got to know about it, okay? We also translated this campaign and the law into various languages so that all citizens of Sweden would be able to recognize that the law had come into force. Ever since this legislation was introduced, of course it has attracted a lot of international attention, and Joan has studied this in Sweden. And it has, at times, no doubt about it, been ridiculed. I have several times, over and over and over, been asked, Marley, is it really possible to bring up children without corporal punishment, without smacking them? And in the years to come, since 1979, we've learned that it is indeed possible to bring up children without corporal punishment. When I meet pretty distinguished ambassadors, you go to New York and you try to influence them to, work on this, and they all say to me, oh, but look at me, I'm a very, very successful person. Where I come from, I'm an ambassador. And then I kind of like to say, look at me, I'm a pretty successful person in my field, and my parents did not beat me, and I'm very happy in my heart. It's a complicated issue, because it's so close to our heart, like Rafi was singing in many of his songs. I think that's why this is by far the most complicated issue that I've worked on within child protection. I come from a child protection and emergency background. I worked with child soldiers, and I worked on child sexual abuse years ago in Africa. And a matter of fact, I have to say this issue, corporal punishment, is definitely the most complicated one. And I think it's due to the fact that all of us, in one way or another, have experienced it, right? But I think let's go back and think about that we need to keep our promise to children affected by violence, whatever the setting or the situation is like. And we must remember to involve you guys. because it is your right to participate, and it contributes to your personal development. And it also promotes evolving capacities among young people. Decisions which are fully informed by your own perspectives will be more relevant, it will also be more effective, and it will for sure be more sustainable. Child participation promotes children's civic engagement. It also promotes peaceful interaction and tolerance and respect for others. A couple of years ago, I was doing a training on awareness raising for corporal punishment in Pakistan, and I do know we've got a gentleman here from Pakistan, a lawyer who works with juvenile justice. And Save the Children has an office, these days in Islamabad, in those days in Peshawar. Peshawar is in the northern part of Afghanistan, close to the border of Afghanistan. And we're doing a training on positive discipline, but foremost awareness raising that corporal punishment is a form of violence. And we did this with the law enforcement staff. And I was the only woman, and I wore my shalwar kameez and my scarf around the head. And we met with some of the young people. They were between 9 and 15. And they had severe scars on their backs, right? We did this training. My colleagues followed up. A year later, I got the great opportunity to go back to Pakistan. And I go to Haripur jail. I got one of the young boys, you know, when they open the gates, so you come in there. And there's one of these young guys running up to me in his blow overall. And he shouts, "Miss Mali, Miss Mali!" And I'm thinking, okay, here we go, okay. And I recognize it's Jalil. It's one of the young guys that, you know, been sentenced, and he's in there for a couple of years. And he starts pulling off his overall. And I'm thinking, okay, here we go. He's been so severely beaten, he's gone mad. He turns around, and he pulls down his overall, and he wants to show me his back. And there are no scars on his back. And I'll be honest with you, I think it's probably one of the most rewarding moments in my professional career, when I had that young guy showing me his back, because of the work that my colleagues had done with awareness raising on why it doesn't work, why corporal punishment doesn't work. I was really, really, really touched. I slept well that night in the shower, let me tell you. I think it's important, some of you already mentioned, who've been up here, the important role of faith leaders. And I know that my friend Chris Dodd will speak about this later on during this conference. I have to say, one of the key, I should say, success factors of Save the Children and our global movement on this is the work with faith leaders. They are so crucial. It makes such a difference when you include them. They are gatekeepers, they can be gatekeepers, but they are also duty bearers. So to include faith leaders makes a huge difference. I'll finalize by saying the following, and that is, wherever you are in this world today, you will be told by policymakers, politicians, parliamentarians, and faith leaders for that matter, and caregivers, and randomly picked citizens, that children, you guys, you are the future, right? And that you deserve the best we have. But I find that a bit strange, because we always talk about you in the future. We need to talk about you now. As a matter of fact, as far as I know, you're actually sitting there now, aren't you? And you want this to happen now, right? And I think it's important to do things now. Why wait, right? The widespread and chronic violence against children, including corporal punishment, does not fit into this picture. Sure, no doubt about it, there are various reasons that can serve as an explanation for this violence. But you know what? It can never, never be used as a justification for why this morally unaccepted thing should go on in reality. Never. And overall, corporal punishment, increases the use of violence in society. It also legitimizes violence, in the eyes of succeeding generations, like we saw in the film earlier this afternoon. You know what it does? It actually promotes double standards. Because what it says is that we got two categories of citizens, right? children, adults, and then adults. And I find this quite interesting because, you know, it's viewed as acceptable to hit children. You guys are the smallest, by some of you not very small or whatever, most children are small, and most vulnerable members of society, but not adults. I find that very strange. We know today that there are positive ways to teach, correct, and discipline children. We know that there are things that are far better for the child's development and the relationships with parents and community, and this does not include any form of corporal punishment. As I've tried to describe, is the following thing, and it is that it is indeed possible to change attitudes and the use of corporal punishment in children by introducing legislation, like for example the one in my country. In dealing with cases of abuse that still occur, we need good measures and we need interventions to help children and their families. We also know that hitting children is as unacceptable as hitting anyone else. And it is vital that the law clearly says so. We've all in this room chosen an uphill struggle by working against corporal punishment. And I think it is important that we remember that we very much need to keep up our work to afford children equal protection, so to realize the rights of the child. And in this uphill struggle that we've chosen, we must remember that we do what we do together and with children and young people will have a huge impact in the years to come. Right?
Yes.
It takes time to change attitudes, but it is indeed possible. And not only that, you guys are crucial for this success. I want you to please remember this, because what you do really, really matters. Don't ever forget that. I got an email this morning from my colleague in South Africa, and she's having a problem with her government and the legislation there, and so on, and it is a struggle. But at the end of the day, we know that. That's why we chose to work in this area, okay? And I think it is important to remember, like I said, what we do and what you do really, 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 really matters. It makes a real difference. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.